wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Seahawk fans, welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Mr. Keith Myers. Hey, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. It's a lovely Tuesday, and the Seattle Mariners were winning the last time I looked, so I'm pretty happy about that. And
I saw people were getting nervous.
Oh no,
and I don't know exactly what that means.
That was not. I did not see that. I got out of the car. They were up by a couple of runs, and playoff baseball in Seattle, which hasn't happened since 2001.
Interesting. So today's our midweek show. Each week we come in and we wait until the last second, basically, and we raise a topic together that we do not research together. We kind of come in independently, and this week we thought we'd kind of revisit this whole Russell Wilson thing and what it means for the Denver Bronco franchise. And the reason that it's important to our conversation here is obviously the draft picks that come with that compensation this next year in the 2023 draft. We're also now seeing the Denver media really kind of go at this thing and talking about Russell Wilson in a way that we're just unfamiliar with generally in evaluating the way that they evaluate him. And they're not married to him. They didn't draft him. They didn't watch him grow up. They didn't watch him win a Super Bowl for their franchise and so forth, et cetera. And he's just not meeting expectations there. We're going to dive into that a little bit today, but we also want to tie that back into what that actually means for Seahawks listeners as far as it relates to Geno Smith, the year that Geno's having in Shane Waldron's offense, and what that means kind of for the legacy situation with Pete Carroll. Does that change anybody's opinion on how the Seahawks have been coached, and maybe some of those weaknesses that are being present today are part of what maybe some of the things that were covered for him here with this franchise? Or has Russell Wilson just gotten to that apex of his career that's in the rear view window now, and we're looking at diminishing returns for them? And we got basically the best case scenario out of this trade, right place, right time. So I'm going to let you take the floor for a while and just kind of run with this thing and point us in a direction.
Well, first, I want to just kind of, let's just kind of take a look at where Russ is at this year and in terms of his play. Now, we know that he's got a partially torn lat muscle, which he had a platelet-rich plasma injection in 4 days ago. He's now back at practice. He's expected to continue to play, but anyone in Denver who's expecting him to turn this around and suddenly go back to being Seattle Russ is, I think, going to be disappointed because of that injury. Like, it's going to make it really hard for him to throw those accurate deep balls. That is, what he's known for.
God, this is deja vu. Man, this sounds like the finger situation.
It does sound like the finger situation.
And Russ is kind of stubborn, and I get it. He's a gamer. He wants to play. He's going to do anything he can. But last year totally interfered with his ability to play 100% football for the franchise, and probably cost at least one or two games last year for the Seattle Seahawks. And this year, he's refusing to take any time off, sitting out at all, allowing his body to heal or potentially heal up enough to improve. He's going to go out there, get this injection, which really is a masking agent, to be completely honest. It doesn't solve the problem, just kind of kicks the can a little bit, and not necessarily increase any performance. And in fact, may allow him to hurt himself even further if he presses this thing too much. So what are your thoughts around this thing?
Yeah, it does feel like the finger situation where he came back 3 weeks too early last year, and he's out for 3 weeks, came back, and think about those first three games, like they were bad. And they were bad for us. They were bad for the team. Like the team was probably better served leaving him on the sidelines for a couple more weeks, but they didn't do that because it's Russ, and ultimately it changed their season and made it so that they were definitely going to be in a spot where they could draft Charles Cross. So
let's
that part's good.
I'm going to stop you just real briefly, and let's just have a conversation about ego, because we saw this kind of come out with Seattle last year, and I think it kind of contributed to the idea that he was kind of bigger than the football, bigger than the franchise, and you saw that kind of well up in different times in Seattle, and some of it was rumor and innuendo and so forth. It wasn't really out front, but it was there. And now that we're away from it a little bit, we're not part of the, it's not every day for us. We don't have a vested interest. Now we're seeing it on the outside perspective, and you really kind of see this sort of gamesmanship that he's got going on interfere sometimes with best judgments, especially as it concerns his entire team.
Yeah. And so we saw the other side of that, I think, in 2015, when Russ ended up with a sprained ankle on one leg and a sprained knee on the other, and didn't want to miss time. So he came out and played, but he played within the pocket. He continued to do well. And that was probably, as far as him being a pocket passer, probably his best year. And he, led the team to the playoffs with all of it. So we saw it work, where he fought through and played for his team and all of that. But,
and at a certain level, it's admirable. I mean, you want a gamer, you want a guy that's going to kind of disregard some of those aches and pains every week and stuff. But there's a difference between aches and pains and strains and things that are going to alter the way that you throw the football.
And I mean, are the Broncos a better team with Brett Ripken out there? I don't think so. But at the same time, are they going to win enough games to make the playoffs with Russell Wilson out there? And if they're not, maybe they shut him down, let him go have the surgery now, so he's back sooner and ready for next year, because they need a better version of Russ next year. That's for sure.
This does kind of point to a larger scenario for them, in that, when they signed for him, they traded for him, it was supposed to fix almost every problem they had. They felt there were people in the organization that felt they were one player away. There were a lot of
really good team with a very good defense, a top 10 defense. They've got they had a pretty good offensive line, including both tackles that are quality players, and they've got lots of good weapons. What they didn't have was a quarterback. And
so was that a myth or was that reality?
I think their offensive line has struggled a bit because the interior of their line hasn't been as good this year. But the rest of it,
Garrett Bowles was struggling too.
Well, Garrett Bowles, I think, broke his leg. So,
yeah, right.
He's out now. But basically the line ended up not being as good this year as it was last year. And Russ hasn't been good. So the idea that they were Russell Wilson away from, being a championship contender, assumed that they were getting good Russ and not the Russ that they've got.
So let's talk about the Russ that they got.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about just because it's one thing for everyone to be like, oh, he's doing bad. Or, you look at the record, they're 2-3 and you can put that on the quarterback, but you go through and look at the individual games and the stats, and it really does paint an interesting picture. Because against Seattle in week 1, right, he went 29 of 42 for 340 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions, quarterback rating of over 100. And they lost that game because their running backs fumbled the ball twice at the goal line. They didn't lose that game because of Russ's play. He actually played pretty well in that game. That is true for that game and just about only that game. Because you look at the next one, they beat Houston. But when they beat Houston, he went 14 of 31, 1 touchdown, 1 interception.
They were just fortunate enough to face Houston that day.
They were fortunate enough to. So you've got a situation where he played well and the team lost. He played poorly and the team won. Right. Then they go into San Francisco, 20 of 33 for only 184 yards, only 5.6 yards per attempt. That's terrible. Of course, it's San Francisco, and we know now that San Francisco's defense looks legit. Not that we didn't expect that going in, because that's the strength of that team. But again, they won, but Russ didn't have a great game. Then they come back against the Raiders, right? 17 of 25. That's a good percentage. 9.5 yards per attempt, 2 touchdowns. No interceptions. So you're thinking, all right, quarterback rating of 125. They lost that game. So what you're seeing is that this team is not as Russ goes, the Broncos go, because in those 4 games, the opposite has been true. When Russ has played well, they've lost. And when he's played poorly, they've won. So are they truly one player away? Is Russell Wilson actually making a difference for Denver? And it's really hard to say that they are. This last week, with a 12-9 overtime loss on Thursday night, that was just a brutal game. He went 21 of 39, 274 yards, which looks okay, but it's only a 54% completion. It's only 7 yards per attempt. There was no touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He also took 4 sacks.
And those interceptions were horrible.
Yeah, they were bad. I mean, this is peak bad Russ. Now there was time,
and then you've got to question on this particular game. I think you have to question the injury to the shoulder and what he was playing through and stuff. And yeah, and so
we saw some of this when he was in Seattle, where he would go 3/4 of a game, and just look lost, and then pull it together in the fourth quarter, have an amazing quarter, pull out the win, and you're like, okay, so he had a bad game overall, but he's still Russ. I haven't seen him put it together at the end yet. That just hasn't happened.
There seems to be a little bit of a lack of confidence with him. And then I also want to share this responsibility, I think, with the coaching staff there, Nathan Hackett. And we talked about this a little bit. And before the Denver game, I said, one of the big concerns I think for Denver is just the fact that they've got 3 rookie coaches with very little experience. And that has played out to be a very worrisome concern for them. And the media there is just eviscerating their coaching staff for decisions made, and
they
so
should.
Forth.
Hackett's decision making late in games and his game management and that stuff has been terrible. Like, just think about the Seattle game, right? That 64-yard field goal, which would have been the second longest field goal in NFL history, rather than letting your $250 million quarterback that you just paid and has had a pretty good game go win the game for you. You tried some desperation, kick. That was the wrong call. And it was the wrong call before he missed it. And
so what you've seen is just is kind of a hodgepodge. Now that's why I'm kind of hesitant to go all in on dissing Wilson here here in this show, because I think it's a combination of different things. He doesn't have the weapons that he had here in Seattle, and the offensive line is just as poor, if not worse, as far as pressure percentage and sacks and so forth. And he's just not as evasive as he was in the past. And then he's got this injury thing that who knows exactly when he hurt that. They're reporting, a couple games ago, and I don't know, and so, so now he's completing 60% of his passes. That's off 5-6% historically. He's got 4 touchdowns currently with 3 interceptions. That ratio is completely off for him. A quarterback rating of 82.8 would be a all-time career low for him.
Yeah, and
if it played out the rest of the year.
7 point yards per attempt is not where.
Right. So that points there's a lot going on there, right? And so there's a lot there. Now I can understand Denver when they see the interceptions, and those were awful, and this last game is fresh in their memory, and their media, like the Denver Post and stuff, is posting, man, this could end up being the most epic failure of this organization. So there's a lot of pressure right now going on, especially directed towards Russ. But if they really take a look deeply at this thing, there's a lot going on their offense that is just beyond what Russ is capable of fixing. And you've got rookie coaches out there trying to,
rookie
do things.
Coach with a rookie coordinator behind
and
him.
They've lost their running back, their main running back for the year, and now their left tackle. It's going to be a long year for them, I think. And I agree with you that maybe they should be shutting him down, and maybe they will if they continue to perform poorly in the next few games.
One of the problems, though, is shutting him down, getting him healthy and all of that is great, but they don't have that first round pick. So it's like, or second, you shut your quarterback down. He gets healthier, and then you lose a bunch of games that you might have won, but you get better draft position. Those picks belong to Seattle. So, they don't have quite the incentive to shut him down, other than the idea of getting him healthy and ready for next year.
So let's redirect this conversation. Well, I told you could lead this thing, but I was thinking, how do we tie this thing back to Pete Carroll and John Schneider, the decision to trade, some of the behavior issues that we saw here that are kind of now migrating, and how Geno's doing?
Well, I don't think that we, what you call behavioral issues, need to be part of this conversation, because.
But maybe they do.
I don't know. I'm talking about performance on the field, and that hasn't translated, and I don't think that has anything to do with him being mad at Seattle for not letting him have more control. Like that didn't affect him, last year. It was the finger until he got healthy, and then he played really well. So that wasn't. I don't think
keep
it
in
matters.
mind too, this is one of my favorite players all time in franchise
Absolutely,
history. I own his
too.
jersey, and I want him to go to the Hall of Fame, and I want him to do it in the Seattle jersey. I mean, so there's that. I'm in exactly the same boat. I freaking love watching Russ play. But I want to see good Russ. I don't want to see what we've seen the last couple of weeks, because this has not been fun. And you look at this, and then you start looking at, Russ was supposed to be the thing that covered up all the warts in Seattle, all the problems with Pete Carroll and his play calling and scheme, all the bad offensive line. Right? Russ was the guy that covered all that up. Well, Russ leaves, and he's been not great. He's been, middle, like 15 to 20 in terms of top. He looks like he did in the first 4 games last year. Really?
He was a little better before his injury. But then you compare that to Geno Smith, right? The career journeyman backup, who's playing with the Seahawks with the same set of weapons around him. And he's playing much better. I mean, the Seahawks aren't any better. They're also 2-3, but they're not 2-3 because they're not getting quarterback play.
Yeah, their offense is ranked number 1 in the NFL in DVOA.
Yeah, I mean, Geno is 3rd in the NFL in yards per attempt, behind only Tua and Jalen Hurts.
Yeah,
right above Josh Allen. Right, so in terms of yards, he may be down a little bit at 12th, but the Seahawks also aren't asking him to throw a lot, because that's Pete Carroll's thing. Completion percentage, he's 2nd in the league of players that have played more than one game.
Their offense is so good. Their offense is so good, Keith. They're ranked 9th overall in weighted DVOA.
And the fact
that our defense is awful.
Yeah. You look at at quarterback rating on the year, number 1, Geno Smith, number 2, Patrick Mahomes. We're talking about a guy who was abysmal in New York, has been a journeyman backup. No one's been willing to throw money at him to get it and give him an opportunity to start or any of that.
Somebody's going to throw money at him now.
Someone will after this year. I guarantee that.
That's why I said on Twitter, I just said, listen, this could be the time you start considering extending Geno. And if you like Geno, do you like him enough to give him a 3-year, $75 million deal with a bunch of, $40 million guaranteed, because that's what it's going to take to get Geno back in Seattle. And I didn't, that tweet didn't get met with a lot of resistance. I mean, that was basically, that's probably what we need to do.
And actually at $25 million a year for a starting quarterback, that's cheap, because a lot of them are going for 40 right now.
Exactly.
And if you can get Geno for 3 years at that also gives you an opportunity to draft and develop your quarterback.
And you could get out of it in the 3rd year. I'm thinking.
Yeah. And so, if you needed to, you'd get out. He'll be here for 2 more years, and then you get out of it. Which Denver screwed up, because if you look at, them with this, right? If they were to cut him now and say, we're just going to cut bait, they would take $107 million in
your franchise
in cap hit. Like it would kill them.
It would ruin it. So, but my thing on Geno, so you take the 2 years so next year he plays, you got a backup and even the next year, he's a very inexpensive trade asset.
He is
in his second year. So it's a win-win, I think, for every party. Geno comes back to the team that's comfortable. He proves it again. Mm-hmm. He allows somebody to come in. He's now 33 years old. The next year he'll be 34, but he's under a cheap contract for a great performing quarterback, obviously. And that might be an asset that you could bring in. So
if Seattle had a defense, like at all, they'd be 4-1 right now. If
they had the defense we were talking about
that we thought they were going to have,
they'd be 4-1.
They'd be 4-1, and we'd be having a very different conversation
with maybe a close toss-up game against the 49ers. You just never know.
I don't know. They got steamrolled. Even the offense did by the 49ers. The 49ers defense.
I still think we're having a really different conversation.
We are. I mean, absolutely.
Just think about what we're now discussing regarding Geno Smith. So before the season, you and I were, and I developed this over the course of the offseason. We talked and talked and talked and talked. And I started fairly bullish about, the offense and the potential and so forth. And I came back around, probably closer to where you were, just very, very realistic as far as you painting the picture of, hey, listen, here's the career averages for Geno. We can't expect any more than that. We just haven't seen it. And here we are. We have this offense. It's a new thing. The defense looks like it's going to be good, but the offense, it's going to suck for a while. And sure enough, we get proven completely wrong. 5 games into the season, Geno's really lighting it up, having career year. Good for him.
Yeah, great for him.
I'm loving I just can't even say enough about.
I hate that the defense is bad, though.
Right. But it's crazy how it just flipped that whole script.
One of the other things that I think it needs to be pointed out on the difference between Geno and Russ. One of the things that Russ did every single year he was in Seattle, and he's doing in Denver, is he takes a lot of sacks. Now, part of that is his desire to hold on to the ball and give his receivers more of an opportunity, extend plays. That's where these explosive plays come from, but it also leads to sacks, right? But it was always the thing is he took too many. It was the lack of protection was one of the reasons he wanted out. Geno Smith has only taken 9 sacks through 5 games, less than 2 per game.
A couple of them have been bad, but
a couple of them have been terrible at the end of games. Like even in this last game, like that one in 2 minutes left and whatever. Oh God.
And I would say at least half of the 9, like 5, I'm going to say 5 are on Geno Smith. The offensive line has been outstanding for Geno Smith.
But he's also only taken 9. Russell Wilson has taken 16.
Yeah. And I
Right.
would hazard to say that Geno's time to throw the ball is at least a half a second less than Russ, and I don't have that stat, but I would.
I don't
bet
have it on me either. But the fact that Russ's thing, like, oh yeah, he takes a lot of sacks, but he's behind one of the worst offensive lines in football and all of that. And I know the offensive line is better this year because of the 2 rookie tackles actually being good. But Geno's not taking those sacks. He's getting the ball out of his hand more often. Now, when he does take a sack, God, they're bad. And he needs to fix that. But it's easier to like handle that when he only takes like less than 1 or less than 2 per game.
So what is the purpose of this show, and what is the result? Is Seattle better off as a franchise with Russ gone and Geno being quarterback? I'm not saying Geno's a better quarterback. I'm just saying
honestly
in this
feels
situation,
like we have to say yes at this point. And because saying yes means they got Charles Cross. And was it Boye Mafe was the second pick?
Abe, right. And Abe Lucas,
then Abe Lucas
and Ken
was the
Walker,
third. Yeah.
and Tariq Woolen and Kobe Bryant.
Yeah, but in terms of the actual picks that Seattle,
compensation. Yeah.
Right. From that pick, you've got Charles Cross and Boye Mafe, but then you've also got Fant, who's teams have to account for. You've got Shelby Harris, who's been probably their best defensive lineman other than Al Woods.
And a young backup quarterback for the season. I mean, whatever, you throw it in.
But
you know what I'm saying? So and then you got futures.
And then and these 2 picks coming up. So Seattle's probably going to have 2 top 10 picks.
We also did get that 4th, 5th round swap. So we actually did get Tariq Woolen out of this thing.
Yeah.
Just letting you know.
I'll take that. And so, you go through and you look at all of this. Yeah, Seattle's better off without Wilson because of the draft capital they got, and because Wilson hasn't lived up to anything that he was like in Seattle.
And a $250 million burger.
Oh God, that's what I said with that contract. Like, after this year, if they decide to cut bait because they're like, this isn't working, they can't, because he'll count.
It's like, what's the kid? Jake Cutler.
Yeah, it's an $85 million cap hit. That after 2024, right? After the following year, it's a $49.6 million cap hit. They can't get out from underneath this contract until 2025.
Really? Even that soon? That surprises me.
His 37.
They did a 5-year extension, which was add 2 years, so he's under contract for 7.
His cap hit for 2025, if they cut him, will be $49.6 million. So that they would have to eat that, but that would still save them $5.8 million, because his cap hit, if he's on the roster, is 55.4.
So they have dead cap though all the way throughout.
Yeah.
But they start saving a little bit of money.
After the 2025 season, if they cut him then for 2026, he would still count $31 million against the cap.
Yeah, that's enough to sink a franchise for a while, because those are players you can't sign. So you look at that, and Seattle didn't want to pay him that. And everyone, I mean, Seahawk Twitter was upset that why do you pick the 71-year-old coach over, the franchise quarterback? And those numbers and what it took to sign him, and what it's doing to Denver, unless Russ reverts back to, 2013 through 2016 form, there's still time.
You mentioned Jay Cutler. Jay Cutler was a franchise quarterback for Denver. They didn't like that, the new coaching staff, or he didn't, and all of that. So he asked to be traded. He got traded to the Bears and signed to a big extension. and then was not good. And the Bears were stuck with him
Yes.
for years,
They're still recovering.
waiting for that contract to finally die. And they haven't been good since then. And
they haven't.
This is a type of situation where, unless Russ reverts back to being worth this kind of money.
And I think that's possible. I mean, come on.
Too.
Right. Yeah. Right.
But still, you're looking at this could hamstring that franchise for, the next 5 years.
So I want to bring Pete Carroll into this conversation as we wrap this thing up a little bit.
Yeah,
and Adam Rank came out today with a tweet, and he said Pete Carroll had 2 different Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks at USC. Russell Wilson went from a 3rd round pick to a Super Bowl winner. Maybe he gets a little credit for coaching quarterbacks.
Yeah. And look at his best quarterbacks when he was at USC were NFL washouts. Matt Leinart.
Yeah, but he had whatchamacallit?
I guess he had Carson Palmer. Who was good. But I mean, then you look at like John David Booty, right? I don't even think he landed a backup job more than a year in the NFL. Like those,
antidote, Matt Leinart. Well, no, it was Mark Sanchez who took over Geno Smith's job. Yeah.
Yep.
So, what I'm leading to here is that
Pete Carroll knows how to make quarterbacks look
good. Right.
And I think that is something that needs to be said. His system and the way he does things makes quarterbacks look good.
Apparently we've got 2 quarterbacks successively in a row. We haven't had a large enough sample size yet on Geno Smith, but we haven't seen
Russell. We haven't seen Russell Wilson at his best in Denver either. I think
not. Oh God, no. I think that he's going to be fine.
I think he has very good years, very good games ahead of him. But still,
it could go sideways really quick there, and it might not be recoverable. So we'll see. I need him to be successful though, sooner rather than later. Or he can get run out of town. The thing about Geno is that I was on the fence. I mean, I'm definitely a fan of redemption and of coming back and read. I mean, the things that Geno has done this year has just been remarkable. I'm all for that.
Crazy good.
We had tempered that conversation in our last show prior, the preview show of the Saints, saying, listen, he's done it against the Broncos defense, which was great. He didn't have very much success at all against the 49ers. He had good success against the Falcons and the Lions that were poor defenses.
They're bad defense.
What can he do against the Saints?
The Saints are a good defense, and that the offense was not the problem. Geno Smith was not the problem.
No. In fact, he looked great. I mean, he had some throws, Keith. I'm telling you, I thought if I closed my eyes, Russell Wilson was throwing those things.
God, some of those were,
like some of those were that pretty. Drop in to Fant where he was going left and threw that thing across his body, and then the throws to Lockett.
That touchdown to Lockett over 2 defenders, dropped it perfectly. God, that could have been a Russell Wilson throw. That was just pretty.
Right. So, now that I've seen that against this team, I think I'm much more open to the idea that maybe the way that they've designed this thing and the confidence that Pete Carroll stuck with Geno, in the most critical moments where Geno, he needed to come to step up. Locke was there, came in on this trade, but Pete stuck with Geno and said, listen, this is Geno's job to lose. He's my guy going into training camp. And then Locke, that was it.
And Locke never moved him.
And I think that confidence right there is a big, huge, undersell for Pete. And then
I will say with Geno, he needs to show me that he can go win a game.
He would have in this game if our defense was worth any salt. He came back and scored in that fourth quarter twice.
Yeah, he got the big run, so he had nothing to do with that. And but then the touchdown to Lockett, which was beautiful, and got them the lead. And then the defense promptly gave it up. But he got the ball. 31. He got the ball back with an opportunity to win it when it was, after the defense had done their thing. And what did he do? He took that, couldn't move the ball, took that terrible 18-yard sack. When the game was on the line, he shrunk. And we saw him do that twice out of the 3 games that he played last year. The other one was against the Jaguars when they were still in a dumpster fire. And
but
we've seen
that sack came on 3rd down. What if he threw the ball away? We would have punted there anyway.
Would we have? So that you're down with that little time left, I don't think you punt the ball there.
Yeah,
I think you go for it.
Yeah, I know.
You can't go for it when you
I just don't like
an 18-yard sack.
I admit I hate it when you said he shrank in that moment, and I don't know that that's necessarily completely true.
He has yet to, with the ball in his hand late in the game, go win the game. Yeah. And he's had multiple opportunities. Had 2 last year. He's had 3 so far this year. And in every one of them.
Yes. I agree. I need him to go do that. That's definitely.
I need him to go do that.
Yeah.
Because we saw Russ do that over and over and over and over again. When Russ got the ball and they were down 1 or down, down 4 late in the game, there was a confidence there. You knew he could do it. He didn't always do it.
Even with an improved defense, you still need a quarterback that can do that in the NFL.
Yeah, because there's going to be close games, and you got to go win that close game. That's my only complaint against Geno right now. He has outperformed every expectation. And
now we're going to start nitpicking because we want to see that little bit extra that makes a quarterback, top 10 in this league.
Yeah. Well, and I was not a believer. I questioned Pete Carroll and his decision to go with Geno. And honestly, I was wrong. I'm very happy to be wrong. I'm very happy to admit that I was wrong. Geno's been damn good. Except, and I don't think that's nitpicking, because if you're going to sign him to a big contract, like we talked about earlier, he needs to go prove he can do that. And he's failed at every attempt so far. And to me, that is the one thing that I worry about.
It gave me some encouragement to see him lead those 2 drives. Now, granted, one was Kenneth Walker's really long touchdown, and then but that pass to Lockett to take the lead in the 4th quarter. If our defense shows up and creates some stops there, I think we win that game. And so I'm going to give him a little bit of a pass there on that last one, but you're right. You're right.
Yeah. So this was the Let's Be Petty and Talk Smack About Russell Wilson show. Really what it was the legacy of Pete Carroll show, because Pete Carroll's legacy is not going to be, well, yeah, he won, but Russell Wilson carried him. He wasn't that good of a coach. Pete Carroll has put together a team right now that Geno Smith, a guy that no one thought of as a starting quarterback, has looked good. He's looked good, and it's
number 1 offense in the NFL by a lot of different measurements.
Yeah, and so the offense is Pete Carroll's decisions on about the offense and how to run the offense is working without Russ. Well, Russ goes to another team, one that he picked. He wanted to go to that team because he thought he could go and excel and cement his legacy. And on that team, he is failing.
Yes.
And that hurts Russell Wilson's legacy, and it makes Pete Carroll so much stronger.
But now there are, everyone's clamoring about the defense. And so, you kind of have to let that play out as well, I think.
No, the defense is bad.
Yeah, you had mentioned that you need at least 2 cycles to get through churning that roster on the defensive side of the ball to make to make it work as far as
complete scheme change. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know that it's necessarily bad coaching, but it is overall talent deficit that we're looking at. And you can only correct a certain amount to get as much out of that play wise each week. And we'll see what happens. By the way, they signed Bruce Irvin to a practice squad contract here. We'll see if he gets called up anytime soon. But it is interesting that they are going outside now to look for linebackers.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, the defense could be better right now, but the front office and Pete Carroll and John Snyder decided to go and fix some of what was wrong with the offense. They got the 2 rookie tackles and Ken Walker. Right. That's 3 players in the first 3 rounds to fix the offense. And
so far so good.
It's so far so good. I mean, Boye Mafe has looked okay. I mean, he's a guy you can build around, but he doesn't look like a star yet. But you had 4 picks in the first 3 rounds. You spent 3 of them on offense, and all 3 of them seem to be hits. Yeah, your offense is better, but the defense needs work too.
Yeah, and sad to say, we lost Penny for the year. That was confirmed. Having surgery on the tibia and the high ankle sprain. That's a tough deal. He just came out like 2 days before Thursday press conference before the game saying he didn't want to let the fans down. He felt like he let his teammates down with the injuries and wanted to move past that. And then this happens, and it's sucky because it looked like it wasn't anything in his control. This doesn't point to a injury-prone injury. No. This is could have happened to anybody.
Bone breaks aren't something that is like injury-prone situation, because those aren't something that once you hurt it, you're more likely to hurt it again. That's like what happens to your knees and ankles. But the bone break is just, it is what it is. And it actually heals stronger than it was. So,
but unfortunately, now Ken Walker's got his opportunity.
That's not unfortunate. Ken Walker doesn't.
It's unfortunate for Penny.
It's unfortunate for Penny, but Penny looked good, and he looked good last year. He looked good this year. He was, looked like a guy who deserves, a second contract. Maybe not he's a running back, so you don't sign him to a big contract like an Ezekiel Elliott contract, because that's dumb. But he gets to stick around in the NFL. He gets an opportunity to be a starter. He gets to continue to continue to be out there, and he will get his chance regardless of this injury.
We just don't know if it'll be with the Seahawks.
That's what we don't know. Especially if Ken Walker comes out here and does what I think he's going to do and just look great down, for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
The Seahawks won't feel compelled to re-sign Penny for what it'll cost to re-sign him.
Yeah. All right. Let's get out of here. Thanks everybody for joining the show today. You can find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. You can find me at NWC Hawk. The show is at Hawks Playbook and SeahawksPlaybook.com. You can also find the show on your favorite podcast platform and YouTube. And please hit that subscribe button. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NWC Hawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. And the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.